The humid Tuscan air, thick with the scent of cypress and rich soil, clung to Catherine Hayes like a second skin. It was the scent of a world away from the damp, cool forests of Oregon, the world where her life had irrevocably shattered 8 years prior. Standing at the entrance to the shuttle van, the hum of anticipation from the Siena Equestrian Center a low thrum around her, Catherine took a deep, fortifying breath. This place, alive with the rhythmic sounds of hooves and the murmur of international voices, was a stark contrast to the silence that had swallowed her life whole. She adjusted the collar of her worn riding jacket, the familiar texture of comfort, a relic from a time before. Before Sophie, before Willow, before the woods took them both. "Ms. Hayes, the stable manager is waiting," called Tristan, his voice a steady anchor in Catherine's swirling emotions. Tristan had stayed, her loyal groom, through the darkest years, a silent witness to her unraveling grief and the slow, arduous process of putting herself back together. Catherine nodded, a gesture of weary gratitude, and stepped onto the gravel path. The grounds of Siena's prestigious equestrian center were a vibrant tapestry of activity. Riders from every corner of the globe moved with purpose, leading magnificent horses, their coats gleaming under the Italian sun. Sponsors and judges, their faces a mixture of business and pleasure, congregated in small, animated groups, their conversations a low, unintelligible murmur in a dozen different languages. Flags from countless nations fluttered overhead, snapping in the breeze, a colorful testament to the international scale of this off-season Paleodiana event. "The tack trunk is already at our assigned stall," said Maya, her assistant trainer, falling into step beside Catherine. Maya, young and full of a quiet competence, represented the future of Whitmore Stables, a future that felt fragile, constantly on the brink of disappearing itself. And Mira cleared quarantine yesterday afternoon. Catherine's small team from Oregon, Tristan, Maya, and young Cole, her earnest stable hand, looked undeniably out of place amidst the polished European entourages, their matching uniforms, their corporate sponsorships. Her team wore simple navy shirts, the faded Whitmore Stables logo a poignant, almost painful, reminder of a happier time, a time of shared passion and simple joys. "Let's check on Mira first," Catherine said, her voice gaining a note of resolve as she followed the signs guiding them toward the stabling area. With every step, Catherine was transported back to a time when Whitmore Stables had been a respected name, synonymous with quality breeding and a deep love for horses within the American equestrian community. Back when her husband, Richard, was alive, his quiet strength a foundation for their lives, and their daughter, Sophie, a whirlwind of energy and light, spent every spare moment with her beloved horse, Willow, a striking bay mare with a spirit as wild and free as Sophie's own. But all that had been brutally stolen 8 years ago. The stabling area itself was a marvel of temporary architecture, structures erected for the event that nonetheless exuded an air of luxury and efficiency. Polished wood gleamed, brass fittings shone, and country flags hung proudly above each stall door. Catherine quickly located the American flag, and beneath it, a simple placard bearing the name Whitmore Stables. Inside, Mira, a magnificent bay mare whose coat gleamed like burnished copper, nickered softly in recognition at Catherine's approach. The horse had been transported days earlier, a necessary measure to allow her to acclimate to the time difference and the new environment after the mandatory quarantine period. "Hello, beautiful," Catherine whispered, her voice soft with affection, running her hands along Mira's powerful neck, her touch a practiced assessment, checking for any lingering signs of stress or stiffness from the long journey. "How are you holding up?" While Tristan carefully took Mira's temperature, a routine check to ensure her well-being after the demanding travel, Catherine meticulously examined her legs and hooves, her fingers tracing the contours, finding nothing concerning. Meanwhile, Maya efficiently unpacked their equipment. The custom saddle, a piece of exquisite craftsmanship imported from England, a significant investment that had stretched Catherine's already strained finances. the bridle with its handcrafted stitching, a testament to dedication and artistry. The array of grooming supplies, oils, and their pristine competition attire, carefully folded and ready. "She's perfect," Tristan confirmed, his voice calm and reassuring. "Temperature normal, hydration good." "Let's walk her," Catherine decided, a plan forming in her mind. Get her moving after all that standing around. Let her stretch her legs, get a feel for the place. As they led Mira through the wide, immaculate stable lanes, Catherine's gaze took in the surrounding competition horses. Animals valued at hundreds of thousands, some even millions of euros, stood like equine royalty in neighboring stalls. Their handlers, a diverse group from various nations, spoke in a symphony of languages, a backdrop of international equestrian excellence. Catherine fought back the familiar tightness in her chest, the persistent ache that was a constant companion, a physical manifestation of her unresolved grief. This event, this competition, was more than just a chance to revitalize her business. It was her last chance, a desperate gamble to save Whitmore Stables from the relentless tide of financial struggles that had threatened to engulf it since Sophie and Willow vanished. For 8 long years, the farm had felt less like a passion and more like a crushing burden, the demanding reality of keeping it afloat a constant reminder of what she had lost. Only in the past year had she managed to find the strength, the sheer determination, to face the harsh truth. Without a major investment or a lucrative sponsorship, Whitmore Stables would inevitably fold within months. Then, like a lifeline thrown in a storm, had come the letter. An unexpected invitation from the European Equestrian Federation, offering grants to selected American breeders. The all-expenses-paid trip to Siena included flights, accommodation, horse transport, and, most importantly, the opportunity to compete for prestigious breeding partnerships that could revitalize her struggling business, breathing new life into the farm. Catherine didn't fully understand why they had selected her modest farm. So far removed from the glitz and glamour of the international circuit, its finances precarious, but she hadn't been in a position to question the blessing, the unexpected flicker of hope it offered. As they turned a corner in the sprawling stable complex, the sun warm on her face, Catherine noticed a young blonde girl brushing down a stunning Palomino horse. The girl couldn't have been more than 14 or 15, Sophie's age when she disappeared. Her movements were efficient yet imbued with a gentle tenderness as she braided the horse's mane with practiced, knowing fingers, a familiar pattern emerging under her skilled touch. The girl caught Catherine's gaze and offered a warm, open smile. Catherine smiled back automatically, a reflex born of years of interacting with young riders, though her heart ached with a familiar, profound sorrow. How many times had she watched Sophie grooming Willow, just like that? The familiar braid pattern, the gentle whispers into the horse's ear, a private language between girl and animal, a bond as deep and complex as any human relationship. For a fleeting, painful moment, Catherine allowed herself to imagine it was them, Sophie and Willow, here in this distant, sun-drenched place, the years of separation a cruel, impossible dream. Ms. Hayes, Maya's voice, practical and grounding, pulled her back to the present reality with a gentle tug. "The tack inspector will be at our stall in 15 minutes. Right?" Catherine said, blinking away the lingering image, the phantom ache of memory. "Sophie will be 22 now, not this young girl. Let's head back." The reminder, a stark confrontation with the passage of time and the permanence of her loss, was a necessary, painful anchor. They circled the complex once more, allowing Mira sufficient time for a proper exercise after her journey, her powerful muscles flexing with each stride before returning to their assigned stall. The team worked with a seamless, quiet coordination, each member knowing their role, a well-oiled machine born of years of shared experience. Tristan, his hands strong and capable, brushed Mira's coat to a mirror shine, the mare's deep bay color glowing under his ministrations. Maya prepared the saddle pad, affixing their competition number with precision, her movements quick and efficient. Cole, the youngest of the team, meticulously cleaned every piece of metal on their tack until it gleamed, reflecting the dedication they all shared, the pride in their craft. Catherine supervised, her eyes missing nothing, as they braided Mira's mane in the traditional dressage style. 43 small, tight braids that would hold perfectly through her performance, a testament to discipline and presentation, a ritual as old as the sport itself. The ritual was soothing, familiar, a comforting reminder of why she had once loved this life, before grief had cast its long, suffocating shadow. Just as they finished, a final, satisfying tuck of a braid, a silent agreement that their preparation was complete, Catherine glanced across the arena to the far ring. A tall man was walking a striking horse, a bay with distinctive white markings. Something about his gait, the way he carried himself with an air of quiet confidence, a subtle arrogance, struck Catherine as familiar, a distant echo from a past life. "Wait here," she told her team, her voice barely above a whisper, a sudden urgency propelling her forward. "I need to check something." "But Ms. Hayes," the inspector, Maya protested, her brow furrowed with concern, her gaze following Catherine's. "I'll be quick," Catherine assured her, her voice firm despite the tremor she felt inside, already walking with purpose toward the far ring. As she drew closer, recognition dawned, a jolt of surprise, a disorienting collision of past and present. The impeccably dressed man, his silver-streaked hair catching the sunlight, his Italian leather boots gleaming, was Gregorio Duca. Catherine hadn't seen him in years, not since the intensive, agonizing search for Sophie, the days blurring into a nightmare of fear and uncertainty. Gregorio had owned property neighboring hers in Oregon's fertile Willamette Valley. He had been a fixture in their lives once, Richard's closest friend, a generous benefactor to their farm, a man who brought expensive wine to dinner, filling their home with laughter and sophisticated conversation, and offered sage, insightful business advice after Richard's illness had cruelly taken him, leaving a void in Catherine's life that could never be filled. Gregorio had remained present for a while after Richard's death, offering support and kindness, a comforting presence in her early grief. But after Sophie's disappearance, as Catherine retreated into the isolating fog of grief, their connection had dissolved, the shared history overshadowed by unspeakable loss, the pain too raw, too personal to share. Yet here he was, thousands of miles from Oregon, from the shared memories and the painful past, leading a magnificent horse around a practice ring with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to moving through the world's most elite circles, a man who seemed untouched by the passage of time or the weight of sorrow. Catherine stood at the edge of the ring, observing him for a moment, a complex swirl of emotions churning within her, surprise, apprehension, a faint, lingering warmth of past friendship. Gregorio spotted her, and his face lit up with immediate recognition. His wide, charismatic smile hadn't changed at all, a mask of affable charm. "Catherine," he called out, his voice carrying across the ring, immediately handing the horse's lead rope to an assistant and striding toward her with open arms. What an extraordinary surprise. He embraced her warmly, the familiar scent of his expensive cologne, a blend of citrus and sandalwood, bringing back a flood of memories of happier, less burdened times, of dinner parties and shared dreams. "Gregorio," she said, genuinely pleased despite her surprise, the years of separation melting away in the face of his familiar presence. "I had no idea you'd be here." "The equestrian world is small," he replied, his Italian accent, she noticed, had become more pronounced over the years, a subtle shift, though his English remained impeccable, effortlessly smooth. "How have you been, my dear? It's been, 5 years?" "8," Catherine corrected quietly, the single word a heavy weight in the air between them, a stark reminder of the time that had passed, of the life that had been lost. Understanding flashed across his features, a brief shadow of sympathy in his eyes. "Of course 8 years. I'm so sorry, Catherine. Time has its way of blurring in my mind." He squeezed her shoulder gently, a gesture of comfort, a small kindness. "And how is the farm?" Whitmore Stables, still producing champions, I hope. Catherine hesitated, then decided there was no point in pretense, in painting a false picture of prosperity and success. The truth, raw and unvarnished, was the only thing she had left. It's been difficult, to be honest. After Sophie, well, the heart went out of the business. She took a deep breath, the Tuscan air doing little to ease the tightness in her chest, the persistent ache in her soul. I'm actually here hoping to secure some breeding partnerships to keep us afloat, to keep Richard's legacy alive. Gregorios' expression softened with genuine sympathy, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. I'm truly sorry to hear that. You've always bred exceptional horses, Catherine. I still speak of Richard's eye for bloodlines, his innate understanding of conformation and pedigree. What about you? Catherine asked, eager to shift the focus away from her own struggles, her own painful memories. How's your place in Oregon? I heard you expanded. Ah, yes, Gregorio nodded, gesturing expansively, a man clearly at ease with success, with the trappings of wealth and power. The Oregon property still operates, but it's just one of several now. I have establishments in Kentucky, France, and here in Italy. Keeps me traveling constantly. His smile turned rueful, a practiced expression of the demands of his privileged life. The price of success, I suppose. His kindness and familiar charm. The effortless way he made her feel seen and valued, a person of consequence, made Catherine realize just how isolated she had become in her grief, how the world had shrunk to encompass only her sorrow and the demanding reality of keeping the farm afloat. I never properly thank you, Catherine said suddenly, the words bubbling up unexpectedly, a debt she felt compelled to acknowledge. For everything you did during the search for Sophie, the way you coordinated with the police, organized volunteers, offering your resources so freely. Gregorio waved a dismissive hand, his modesty, Catherine suspected, as practiced as his charm, a carefully constructed facade. Please, it was nothing. I only wish we could have. He trailed off, the unspoken words hanging in the air, the shared regret for what could not be changed. The police never did determine what happened in those woods, did they? Catherine shook her head, the familiar pain clutching at her heart, a physical reminder of her unresolved loss. The hoof prints led nowhere, just vanished as if they had been erased. Pieces of torn tack suggested some kind of struggle or accident, a violent end to a simple ride, but she swallowed hard, the lump in her throat a physical manifestation of her grief. With both Sophie and Willow missing, there was just no definitive answer. Some thought animal attack. Others suggested she simply got lost, wandered off the trail in confusion, but without bodies, without any concrete evidence. The uncertainty was its own special kind of torture. 8 years of not knowing, of imagining every possible terrible scenario. Gregorio looked as though he might say more, perhaps offer further condolences or share some memory of Sophie, a small kindness. But then his gaze shifted over Catherine's shoulder, a subtle change in his demeanor, a return to the present. I believe your inspector has arrived at your stall. We shouldn't keep him waiting. These Italians are strict about their schedules, very particular about punctuality. Catherine turned to see a uniformed official standing by Mira's stall, clipboard in hand, his expression one of professional impatience, his gaze sweeping over their group. I should go, she said, the moment of shared history, of connection, fading, the present reality asserting itself. It was good to see you, Gregorio. Likewise, Catherine. Perhaps we can catch up properly later. I'm staying through the exhibition, so there will be opportunities. With a nod and a final, lingering smile, Gregorio turned and walked away, his assistant trailing behind him, leaving Catherine with a whirlwind of emotions and the strange coincidence of seeing him here, so far from home, a ghost from a past life, resurrected in the Tuscan sun. Catherine hurried back to her stall, her mind swirling with memories of Richard, of Sophie, of Willow, and the unsettling feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, her encounter with Gregorio was more than just a coincidence. Catherine returned to find her team standing anxiously beside Mira, the tack inspector already examining their saddle with meticulous, unsmiling care. He was a man of efficiency and precision, his movements sharp and decisive. Sonora Whitmore. He greeted her in heavily accented English, his tone formal and precise, his gaze assessing. Your equipment is very fine. Italian leather on the saddle, yes? English, actually, Catherine replied, stepping forward to show him the small, embossed maker's mark on the leather, a detail that spoke of quality and tradition, a legacy of craftsmanship. The inspector nodded approvingly, his gaze sharp and assessing, then proceeded to check every buckle, strap, and piece of metal on their tack, running his fingers over the cold metal, ensuring it complied with the stringent competition standards, leaving no detail overlooked. As he worked, he explained the day's schedule with efficient brevity, a man focused on the task at hand. You have 20 minutes in warm-up ring 3, beginning at 11 o'clock. The exhibition class starts at 11:30 in the covered arena. Judges will evaluate movement, presence, and handling. Not a competitive class, strictly speaking, but important for the breeding evaluations, he emphasized, highlighting the purpose of the exhibition. He made several quick, decisive notations on his clipboard, his pen scratching against the paper. Your papers are in order. Good luck, Sonora. After he left, leaving behind a faint scent of starch and officialdom, a lingering sense of scrutiny, Catherine huddled with her team to discuss strategy. Due to her persistent sciatica, a painful reminder of a fall she'd taken shortly after Sophie's disappearance, a fall that had shattered more than just bone, leaving a physical and emotional scar, Catherine no longer rode in competitions. Maya, her assistant trainer, a young woman with talent and dedication, would be in the saddle today, a responsibility she took very seriously, her expression one of quiet determination. Remember, this isn't about winning ribbons, Catherine reminded her, her voice low and steady, conveying the true importance of the event. The judges are looking for breeding quality, bone structure, movement, temperament. Let her move naturally, so they can see her true gait, her inherent potential. Maya nodded, already dressed in her tailored show jacket and pristine white breeches, her appearance impeccable. I'll keep the warm-up light, just enough to loosen her up without tiring her, to get her ready without exhausting her. They led Mira to the designated warm-up ring, a hive of activity, filled with the sounds of hooves and voices, where Maya mounted with practiced grace, her movements fluid and confident. As she began to walk the mare in large, measured circles, allowing Mira to stretch and loosen her muscles, Catherine stood at the rail, watching with a critical, experienced eye, assessing every stride, every movement. Around them, other horses and riders executed complex movements, extended trots that covered ground with effortless power, collected canters that showcased control and balance, half-passes that demonstrated years of dedicated training and partnership, a display of skill and artistry. Judges and potential sponsors wandered between the rings, their heads together, making notes and discussing the merits of various horses in hushed, knowledgeable tones, their gazes sharp and discerning. But Catherine's attention was suddenly, violently, drawn to a horse being led to an adjacent ring. Her heart seemed to stumble in her chest, a sudden, sharp intake of breath, a feeling of déjà vu so powerful it stole her breath. The horse was a bay pinto with distinctive white markings, a rich reddish-brown coat accented with striking patches of white on its hindquarters and between its eyes, a pattern that was etched into Catherine's memory. Something about its conformation, the powerful build, the elegant lines, the way it moved with a collected energy and effortless grace, struck Catherine as hauntingly, impossibly familiar, a ghost from the past brought to life. Without thinking, propelled by an instinct she couldn't ignore, a desperate hope that warred with years of despair, she approached the handler, a young Italian groom who stood at attention beside the horse, his posture one of quiet pride in his charge. "Excuse me," Catherine said, trying to keep her voice steady, to prevent the tremor she felt inside from reaching the surface. from revealing the turmoil within her. "This horse is beautiful. Who does it belong to?" The man looked Catherine over, his gaze assessing, seemingly determining whether she warranted a response, whether she was a person of consequence, before answering. "This is Eternal Luce. She belongs to Signora De Luca, the wife of Signor Gregorio Duca." Gregorio's wife? Catherine echoed, surprised, the name echoing in her ears. In all the years she'd known Gregorio, she'd never met his spouse, despite numerous dinner invitations to their sprawling Oregon property, a fact that now struck her as strangely significant. "Yes," the handler confirmed. "Signora Bella De Luca. She is there." He gestured toward a shaded gazebo where a slender woman in large, dark sunglasses sat alone, a glass of white wine held loosely in her hand, an image of solitary elegance. "Signor Duca will ride Eternal Luce in the exhibition class later," the handler added, offering a piece of unsolicited information, a detail that further piqued Catherine's interest. "Special showcase, not for competition." "Thank you," Catherine murmured, her attention already back on the horse, her gaze fixed on the familiar markings, searching for confirmation of the impossible. The markings, the conformation, even the way the horse tossed its head impatiently, a subtle, familiar gesture, a flash of spirit. It all reminded her so powerfully of Willow that it made her chest ache, a deep, visceral pain, a resurgence of old wounds. But it couldn't be Willow. That was impossible. Willow had disappeared in the Oregon woods 8 years ago, thousands of miles from here, a world away, lost forever. "Miss Hayes," Maya called from the ring, her voice bringing Catherine back to the present with a jolt, an unwelcome interruption to her racing thoughts. Should I take her into a working trot now? Catherine forced her attention back to her own horse and rider, pushing aside the unsettling familiarity of Eternal Luce. "Yes, start your warm-up sequence. I'll be right there." After ensuring Maya had Miro well in hand for the warm-up, her movements fluid and confident, Catherine decided to approach Gregorio's wife. If nothing else, common courtesy, a remnant of her old life, dictated that she should introduce herself, given her long history with Gregorio. The elegant woman sat alone under the gazebo, seemingly indifferent to the prestigious equestrian activities surrounding her, a world of passion and dedication that held no interest for her. Her designer sunglasses obscured her eyes, creating a barrier, a shield, and her posture. One leg crossed elegantly over the other, wine glass held loosely in manicured fingers, suggested both refinement and a profound boredom, a weary resignation. "Excuse me," Catherine said as she approached, her voice polite and hesitant, feeling a sense of trepidation. "I hope I'm not intruding. I'm Catherine Hayes." The woman tilted her head slightly, a subtle movement, but didn't remove her sunglasses, maintaining the enigmatic barrier, the wall between them. "Yes," Catherine continued, feeling a slight awkwardness, an uncertainty about how to proceed. "I'm an old friend of Gregorio's from Oregon. Our farms were neighbors for many years." "Ah." The woman's voice held the faintest trace of an accent Catherine couldn't quite place, a melodic undertone that hinted at a different origin, a life lived elsewhere. "Yes, Gregorio has many friends." Catherine hesitated, taken aback by the coolness of the response, the subtle dismissal in her tone, a clear indication that she was not particularly welcome. "I don't believe we've ever met, despite all the dinners Gregorio hosted when my husband was alive, all the years we lived as neighbors. I spend most of my time in Italy," the woman replied, taking a deliberate, slow sip of her wine, her gaze fixed on something in the distance, her attention clearly not on Catherine. "My husband travels for business. I rarely accompany him to America." There was something in her tone, a subtle detachment, a world weariness, that made Catherine consider retreating, letting the moment pass. But the nagging familiarity of the Pinto horse, the insistent voice in her mind, compelled her to persist, to push past the polite barriers. She gestured toward the nearby ring, where Eternal Luce was now being walked by the groom. "Your horse, Eternal Luce, is absolutely stunning." The markings are remarkably similar to my daughter's horse from years ago, a horse we lost. At the mention of the horse, a subtle tension seemed to enter the woman's posture, a tightening of her shoulders, a slight shift in her seated position, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes behind the dark lenses. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little sharper now, a defensive edge to her tone. "But as I said to the officials, we're not here for the competition, just the exhibition." Catherine nodded, her gaze returning to Eternal Luce, studying her intently, searching for confirmation of the impossible, a desperate hope taking root. "May I ask how old she is?" The resemblance to my daughter's horse is quite striking, almost uncanny. The woman shifted in her seat again, her discomfort now more obvious, a subtle restlessness. She hesitated for a moment before answering, as if searching for the right words, the right explanation. "I'm not certain, to be honest. Gregorio gave her me as a gift, perhaps 7 or 8 years ago." She waved a hand vaguely, a dismissive gesture, as if the details were unimportant. "I'm not particularly interested in the technical aspects of horses, their breeding or age." "I see," Catherine said, her voice quiet, even as her mind raced, calculating the timeline, the impossible coincidence. 8 years ago, exactly when Sophie and Willow had disappeared. The timing was too precise, too aligned with her own tragedy, to be mere chance. The coincidence, if it was a coincidence, was too profound to ignore, too painful to dismiss. "I should find my husband," the woman said abruptly, rising from her seat with a fluid motion, as if eager to escape the conversation. "He gets distracted at these events, easily drawn into conversations." As she stood, Catherine caught the direction of her gaze through the tinted lenses of her sunglasses, focused across the grounds where Gregorios stood, surrounded by a small crowd, including several young women with cameras, their faces upturned and smiling, clearly captivated by his charm. "You never know with men," the woman added with a coldness that belied her attempt at humor, a cynicism that was palpable, a deep-seated bitterness. "One minute they're taking pictures, the next it's dinner, and then, she made a dismissive gesture with her fingers, a flick of her wrist, a gesture of world-weary understanding. The bitterness in her voice caught Catherine off guard. This did not sound like a happily married woman, a woman content with her life. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name," Catherine said, a genuine curiosity in her voice, a desire to understand this complex, troubled woman. "Bella," the woman replied. "Bella DeLuca." Without further conversation, without another glance at Catherine, Bella walked away, her stride purposeful, as she headed toward her husband, a picture of elegant detachment. Catherine watched as Bella approached Gregorio, who immediately put his arm around her for a photo opportunity, his smile never wavering, a mask of affable charm firmly in place. But even from a distance, Catherine could sense the performative nature of their interaction, the forced intimacy, the lack of genuine connection. Something about their relationship, the subtle tension beneath the surface, struck her as deeply wrong, a facade maintained for public consumption that masked a more complex, perhaps even sinister, reality. As Catherine turned to rejoin her team, her mind kept returning to Eternal Luce. The timing of Bella's acquisition of the horse, the distinctive markings, the unnerving resemblance to Willow, it seemed too coincidental to be mere chance, too aligned with her deepest fears. But what would Gregorio be doing with her daughter's missing horse? The very idea was absurd, a fantastical notion born of grief and desperation, a mother's longing given form. Yet, the image of Willow, the beloved horse that had vanished with her daughter, was seared in her memory, every detail vivid and clear, and the horse in the ring was undeniably, breathtakingly similar. Catherine returned to the warm-up ring, just as Maya was concluding Mira's preparation. The mare moved beautifully, her strides fluid and powerful, exactly what the judges would be looking for in breeding stock, a picture of equine perfection. "She's ready," Maya reported as she walked Mira to the rail, her voice filled with quiet confidence, a sense of accomplishment. "Responsive and forward without being too hot, just right." Catherine nodded, then noticed a pair of judges standing nearby, making notes as they observed various horses, their gazes sharp and assessing. She approached them with a professional smile, a practiced mask of composure, presenting herself and her horse with quiet confidence. "Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Catherine Hayes of Whitmore Stables." The older of the two judges, a distinguished-looking man with a silver mustache and keen eyes, inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement. "Ah, yes, from Oregon, correct? We were just admiring your mare. Exceptional conformation, very well presented." "Thank you," Catherine replied, a flicker of pride in her voice, a sense of validation. "She represents our best breeding program. Though I'll admit, our farm has faced challenges in recent years, like many small businesses." "We're aware," the judge replied, his tone understanding, a recognition of her struggles. "Your application was quite candid about your financial situation. It's precisely why the Federation extended the invitation, to help preserve bloodlines that might otherwise be lost due to economic factors rather than quality issues, to support those who maintain the integrity of the breed." His colleague, younger but equally observant, added, "You should prepare to bring your horse into the indoor arena soon. The exhibition class begins in 10 minutes. As they walked toward the covered arena, a vast, climate-controlled structure with perfect footing and tiered seating for spectators, a place designed for showcasing equine talent, Catherine remained by Mira's side, offering quiet encouragement to both horse and rider, a silent bond between them. While waiting for their turn, Catherine noticed Eternal Loose being led toward the arena by a handler, neither Bella nor Gregorio in sight. The horse's resemblance to Willow continued to nag at her, a persistent, unsettling feeling, a question mark hanging in her mind. Deciding to use this opportunity to network, to potentially secure a future for Whitmore Stables, to make the most of this unexpected chance, Catherine approached a group of breeders gathered near the entrance. Before she could introduce herself, however, she overheard snippets of their conversation, voices lowered in a mix of gossip and speculation, the undercurrent of the equestrian world. His wife seemed quite upset, probably because he increased his charitable donation without consulting her. "You know how he is with his grand gestures." "No, I think it's because she wanted to take Eternal Loose home early." She seemed quite agitated. Catherine slowed her approach, realizing with a sinking feeling that they were discussing the Duchess. She changed direction, uncomfortable with the idea of joining a gossip session about people she knew, especially when one had once been a close family friend, a part of her life's fabric. As she turned away, she spotted Bella standing alone near the refreshment table, another glass of white wine in hand, a solitary figure amidst the crowd. The woman's posture radiated tension and isolation, a stark contrast to the polished social interactions around her. Against her better judgment, compelled by an instinct she couldn't fully explain, a sense of a shared burden, Catherine approached her again. "Hello," Catherine began tentatively. "I'm not in the mood for small talk." Bella cut her off immediately, her voice low and sharp, a cutting edge to her words, a clear desire to be left alone. Catherine paused, taken aback by the bluntness, the raw, exposed vulnerability in her tone. "I'm sorry to disturb you." Something in Catherine's tone, a genuine empathy that resonated with Bella's own hidden pain, a recognition of a kindred spirit, must have reached her, because Bella's rigid posture softened slightly. "No, I apologize. That was rude." She sighed, a sound of weary resignation, of burdens carried for too long. "These events, they drain me. All these people, all the performance of it all, the endless facade." "I understand," Catherine said, a shared understanding passing between them, a moment of connection. "I've never been comfortable with the social aspects of the equestrian world either. My daughter was always the natural, charming judges, making friends with competitors, effortlessly navigating the social landscape." The mention of Sophie brought a familiar pang, a bittersweet ache, a reminder of what had been lost. But Catherine found herself continuing, compelled to share a piece of her story, to reveal her deepest wound. "She disappeared 8 years ago. We never found her." Bella removed her sunglasses, revealing tired eyes that held a depth of sorrow and, unexpectedly, genuine sympathy, a recognition of shared pain. I'm sorry. That's unimaginable, a parent's worst nightmare. The moment of connection, of shared vulnerability, seemed to break through Bella's defensive wall, a crack appearing in her carefully constructed facade. She took a large, fortifying sip of wine, then said, her voice low and confiding, a confessional whisper, "Gregorio forced me to come today. He knows I hate these events, the media attention, the fake smiling, the endless pretense." She leaned closer to Catherine, her voice dropping to a whisper, sharing a secret. But this morning he insisted, kept saying I needed to bring eternal loose, claim her as my own, present her to the world. Catherine's interest sharpened, a sudden, sharp focus, her mind racing to connect the pieces. "What do you mean, claim her as your own?" Bella glanced around, a flicker of paranoia in her eyes, a fear of being overheard, then lowered her voice even further, a conspiratorial tone. "If I tell you something, you must promise not to repeat it, not to anyone." When Catherine nodded, a silent pledge of confidentiality, her curiosity overriding her caution, Bella continued, "Eternal Loose isn't even my horse. I have my own mare, Nina, at our estate, a beautiful animal. But Gregorio insisted I present this one as mine today." She paused, a troubled expression on her face, her voice laced with confusion and unease. Said something about showcasing our collection and how the horse is too exceptional to keep hidden away, that she needed to be seen. Catherine's mind raced with the implications, the horrifying possibilities. Why would Gregorio lie about the ownership of a horse? And why did that horse look so much like Willow? The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, forming a terrifying picture. Before she could formulate a careful, measured response, before she could voice the questions swirling her mind, Bella grabbed her arm, her grip surprisingly strong, a desperate urgency in her touch. "Come with me. I need air." She finished her wine in one swift motion, the glass emptying in a single gulp, as if seeking courage in the liquid. Everyone thinks marrying money means freedom, a life of ease, but it's just a different kind of cage, a gilded prison. The property, the income, it all comes with strings, with obligations. Look at all this. Her voice dropped even lower, a confessional whisper, revealing the depth of her unhappiness. "Sometimes I think I should just divorce him and be done with it. Just walk away from it all." Without waiting for an answer, without another word, she pulled Catherine away from the exhibition hall, out into the bright, warm Tuscan sunshine, leaving the world of polished surfaces and hidden secrets behind. Outside the exhibition hall, Bella moved with a surprising purpose for someone who had consumed at least 2 glasses of wine in a short amount of time, her movements quick and decisive. She paused at a refreshment table to claim yet another glass, her movements automatic, a practiced habit, a coping mechanism, then reached into her designer purse and extracted a small pill. "Just my medication," she explained, catching Catherine's concerned glance, a fleeting moment of self-awareness. "Lorazepam. Doctor's orders. Helps with—" She waved her hand vaguely, encompassing the entire scene, the overwhelming performance of it all, the demands of her life. All of this. She swallowed the pill with a sip of wine, her expression one of practiced detachment, then gestured for Catherine to follow her. "Come, I want to show you something." They walked together along a winding path that led away from the main exhibition area, toward a section marked with double VIP credentials and additional security personnel, a clear indication of exclusivity and control. Bella nodded to the guards, who clearly recognized her, and allowed them to pass without question, their faces impassive, accustomed to her movements. The exclusive area featured private viewing boxes and luxury stabling for horses belonging to the wealthiest owners and sponsors, a world of privilege and access, hidden away from the general public. Bella led Catherine along the perimeter, then suddenly pulled her behind a decorative hedge, the thick foliage offering a measure of concealment, a place to observe without being seen. "Look there," she whispered, pointing toward a secluded stable entrance, set apart from the others, a place that seemed deliberately hidden. Catherine peered around the foliage and felt her breath catch in her throat, a sudden, sharp constriction in her chest, a wave of nausea washing over her. Gregorio stood in conversation with the young blonde girl Catherine had noticed earlier, the one brushing the Palomino horse. Up close, in the harsh light of day, Eleanor could see that the girl was even younger than she'd first appeared, perhaps just 15. Gregorio's body language was unmistakable, disturbingly intimate, a predatory closeness. One arm was propped casually against the stable wall beside the girl's head, leaning down to speak to her with an intensity that made Catherine's skin crawl, a sickening wave of unease washing over her. "That can't be legal," Catherine whispered, horrified, the words a choked whisper, a desperate denial of what she was seeing. "She's clearly underage." Bella laughed, a harsh, bitter sound devoid of humor, laced with cynicism. "This is Italy. Age of consent is different here. Besides, who would challenge Gregorio Duca, the great philanthropist, the job creator, the savior of struggling communities? He is untouchable here." Before Catherine could respond, before she could voice the outrage she felt, the disgust rising within her, Bella tugged her away, pulling her back from the hedge, back into the shadows. "Now you understand why I hate him," she muttered as they retreated down the path, her voice laced with a deep, simmering resentment, a lifetime of buried anger. "Let's go back before they see us, before he realizes we were here." Catherine's mind raced as they returned to the exhibition hall. The implications of what she'd witnessed, the disturbing intimacy between Gregorio and the young girl, combined with the strange, unsettling coincidence of eternal loose resemblance to Willow, created a terrifying and confusing picture, a dark tapestry of deceit and manipulation. She wasn't sure how to process it, how to reconcile the pieces of this unsettling puzzle, how to fit them together into a coherent whole. Should she report Gregorio? To the event organizers? To the police? But what would she say? That he was speaking too closely with a young girl? That his horse resembled one that disappeared in America 8 years ago? That his wife, who seemed unstable and possibly overmedicated, made vague accusations? The pieces didn't fit, not yet, not in a way that would be believed. As they re-entered the hall, the air thick with the scent of horses and expensive perfume, Bella veered toward the stall where Eternal Loose stood, a picture of equine perfection, seemingly unaware of the drama swirling around her. The horse's ears pricked forward as they approached, and Catherine was struck again by the familiar way it tossed its head, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, exactly as Willow used to do, a gesture that spoke volumes to Catherine. "You said this horse reminds you of your daughters," Bella said abruptly, her gaze fixed on the horse, a strange intensity in her eyes. "The one that disappeared." "Yes," Catherine replied, her voice quiet, a confirmation of the undeniable similarity. "The markings are extraordinarily similar." Bella ran her hand along the horse's neck with a detached affection, her touch a strange mixture of tenderness and indifference, as if she were touching something beautiful but not truly hers. "You're the only person who's approached me today with genuine conversation rather than social obligation, rather than simply seeking favor with Gregorio." She turned to Catherine with sudden intensity, her eyes, no longer hidden behind sunglasses, revealing a complex mixture of sadness and defiance, of weariness and a flicker of rebellion. "I like you." You brightened what would have been another miserable day of pretending, of living a lie. Before Catherine could respond, before she could process the unexpected declaration, the weight of Bella's words, Bella announced, her voice firm and decisive, "The horse is yours." "What?" Catherine stared at her in confusion, certain she had misunderstood, that she hadn't heard correctly. "Eternal Loose. I'm giving her to you. Consider it a gift between friends, a gesture of solidarity." Catherine shook her head, stunned by the extraordinary, inexplicable offer, the sheer generosity of it. "I can't possibly accept." You said the horse isn't yours, that Gregorio insisted you claim her. I don't care. Bella's smile held a sharp, almost predatory edge, a hint of defiance. He forced me to claim her as my own, to present her as mine, so that's exactly what I'm doing. Exercising my ownership, my small act of rebellion, by giving her to someone who will appreciate her, who has a genuine connection to her. Catherine approached the horse hesitantly, a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope warring within her, extending a hand toward its muzzle, a silent offering of friendship. To her surprise, Eternal Luce leaned forward immediately, pressing her nose into Catherine's palm with a familiar, gentle affection, a gesture that sent a jolt of recognition, a wave of overwhelming emotion through Catherine. This was Willow. She was certain of it. There was no longer any doubt. Catherine spent the next hour in deep, intense conversation with Bella near Eternal Luce's stall. The casual exchange gradually evolved into something more meaningful, more profound, as Catherine, compelled by a need to share her story, to unburden herself, shared the devastating details of Sophie's disappearance, the agonizing search, and its profound impact on her life. She was 14, Catherine explained, her voice soft, a fragile thread of sound, the memories still sharp and painful. A natural with horses from the time she could walk, a true horse whisperer. That morning was like any other. She took Willow for a trail ride in the woods behind her property, a path she knew intimately. When she didn't return for lunch, I wasn't immediately worried, thinking she had simply lost track of time. But by dinner, as Catherine spoke, the words flowing out of her, a torrent of pain and longing, she became increasingly aware of the many, undeniable similarities between Willow and Eternal Luce, not just in appearance, in the striking white markings and the rich bay coat, but in mannerisms, in the subtle, unique ways the horse moved and interacted. The way the horse kept reaching over to nudge Catherine's shoulder, a gentle demand for attention, a familiar gesture of affection, the distinctive nervous pawing when strangers approached, the intelligent, curious gaze in her eyes, filled with a gentle spirit. It seemed impossible that this could be Willow, that her daughter's horse could be here, thousands of miles away, after all these years of believing she was gone forever. Yet, each passing moment, each shared gesture, each familiar mannerism, strengthened Catherine's growing suspicion, a terrifying certainty that was taking root in her heart, a desperate hope blooming in the barren landscape of her grief. If this was indeed Sophie's horse, what did that mean for Sophie? How had Willow ended up in Italy, in Gregorios' possession? And what might that suggest about Sophie's fate? Was she alive? Was she here? The implications were too frightening to fully consider, too painful to confront head-on, but the possibility, however terrifying, was undeniable. Their conversation, the fragile connection they had forged, was abruptly interrupted by the sound of someone clearing their throat, a polite but firm interruption. Both women turned, startled, to find Gregorio standing behind them, his expression carefully neutral, a mask of practiced composure as he adjusted his silk tie, a picture of effortless elegance. "There you are, cara mia," he said to Bella, leaning down to kiss her cheek, a gesture of possessiveness that seemed at odds with Bella's earlier confessions, with the bitterness she had expressed. If he noticed her slight recoil, her almost imperceptible pull away from his touch, he didn't acknowledge it, his focus elsewhere. "I've been looking for you." "Gregorio," Bella replied, her voice a practiced sweetness, a stark contrast to the bitterness she had expressed moments before, the mask of the dutiful wife firmly in place. "Catherine and I were just becoming acquainted. I've decided to give her Eternal Luce as a token of friendship, a gesture of goodwill." The change in Gregorio's expression was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable to Catherine. A momentary widening of the eyes, a slight tensing of the jaw, before his features rearranged themselves into an expression of feigned confusion, a flicker of disbelief. "You did what?" he asked, his voice deceptively light, a dangerous undertone beneath the casual tone, a hint of suppressed anger. "I gave Eternal Luce to Catherine," Bella repeated calmly, her voice steady, a newfound strength in her tone, a quiet defiance. She admired her so much, and I wanted to offer something meaningful to honor our new friendship, to make a connection. Bella, Kara, Gregorios' voice dropped to a whisper, though his smile remained fixed, a strained mask, the pleasant facade cracking. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, away from prying ears. There's nothing to discuss, Bella countered, her gaze unwavering, holding his. You told me to claim this horse, to present her as mine, so she's mine to give away, to dispose of as I see fit. But I told you it's only for. Gregorio pressed his fingers to his temple, a gesture of exasperation, his gaze darting nervously around the stable area, assessing who might be listening. This horse is owned by. He trailed off, unsure whether to go on, whether to reveal the truth in front of Catherine, the precarious nature of his deception. Catherine attempted to intervene, a sense of urgency rising within her, a need to understand the truth. Gregorio, please, if this causes any problem, any inconvenience. He thought about it for a brief moment, weighing his options, assessing the potential damage. Then, no, he interrupted, his charm reasserting itself, though his eyes remained cold, devoid of warmth, a chilling emptiness. You know that Bella's right. If this is what Bella wants, then of course. He turned to his wife, his smile broadening, a performance for any watching eyes, a display of marital harmony. You're right, Kara. The horse was yours. I simply didn't expect. He trailed off again, as several nearby competitors glanced in their direction, clearly aware of the tension, the unspoken conflict, despite Gregorio's attempt to keep his voice down, to maintain the illusion of control. Gregorio straightened, switching tactics, regaining control of the situation, his voice smooth and practiced. Well, it seems my wife has made a generous decision. Catherine, please accept this gift in the spirit of our long friendship, as a token of our shared history. His smile broadened, a disarming display of bonhomie, of effortless charm. And Bella, I have good news that might cheer you. I found a new handler for our stables. Young Elysia, whom you met earlier. Very talented with horses, a promising young rider. Bella's expression hardened, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes, a recognition of a familiar pattern. She's a minor, Gregorio. You know the rules. No. He countered smoothly, his voice a silken reassurance, dismissing her concern. She assured me she's 20. Just small for her age. You know how some people are. She doesn't look a day over 16, Bella insisted, her voice firm, unconvinced by his facile explanation. Gregorio waved a dismissive hand, brushing aside her concern, his impatience evident. I would never hire someone underage for such responsibilities, Catherine. You know me better than that. The subtle undertone in his voice, the unspoken threat, the chilling implication, made Catherine's skin crawl. She glanced at Bella, who simply took another sip of wine, her eyes revealing her disbelief and disgust, but her lips remaining sealed, a silent protest. Catherine, Gregorio said suddenly, turning his full attention to her, his smile now focused solely on her, a predatory gleam in his eyes. You must come visit our estate. It's just an hour's drive from here in Valdiorcia. Beautiful countryside, truly breathtaking. Your team can remain here with your competition horse. They'll be well looked after, I assure you. That's very kind, but I should stay for the exhibition, Catherine began, feeling a growing sense of unease, a strong reluctance to accompany him. Nonsense, Bella interrupted, surprising Catherine with her sudden insistence, her voice holding a note of desperate urgency. The show has become tedious, utterly predictable. I'm desperate to leave, and having you with us would make the afternoon bearable, a welcome distraction. Catherine hesitated, torn between her professional obligations, the need to secure the future of her farm, and her growing certainty that something deeply wrong, something hidden and disturbing, surrounded Gregorio Duca. Something that might, just might, relate to Sophie's disappearance. The coincidence of Willow's presence, the unsettling interaction with Elysia, Bella's cryptic remarks, It was all too much to ignore. "All right," she agreed finally, the words feeling heavy on her tongue, a sense of stepping into the unknown. "All my team know." As they walked toward the parking area, the sounds of the competition fading behind them, Catherine observed Gregorio speaking quietly to one of his staff members, his gaze fixed on young Elysia across the grounds, a look of possessive interest in his eyes that made Catherine's stomach clench. The man nodded and headed in the girl's direction. Catherine's unease deepened, a cold knot tightening in her stomach, a sense of impending danger. She climbed into the back of Gregorio's luxury SUV beside Bella, the plush leather seats a stark contrast to the fear gripping her. Gregorio took the front passenger seat beside his driver, a silent, imposing figure. As they pulled away from the Equestrian Center, leaving the bustling crowds and the scent of horses behind, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that she was either making the biggest mistake of her life or finally, after 8 agonizing years, approaching the truth about what happened to her daughter. The sleek vehicle sped through the Tuscan countryside, the landscape a blur of green and gold, carrying her towards a destination shrouded in mystery and fear. The drive to Valdiorcia took them through some of Tuscany's most breathtaking landscapes. Rolling hills dotted with ancient cypress trees, their dark forms silhouetted against the azure sky, stood sentinel over meticulously kept olive groves and vineyards that stretched to the horizon, a timeless, idyllic scene. Under different circumstances, Catherine would have been captivated by the sheer beauty of the scenery, the timeless charm of the Italian countryside, a place of art and history. Instead, her mind swirled with questions and suspicions, a chaotic jumble of thoughts, a growing sense of dread. The abrupt decision to hand over the horse, the unexpected invitation to the estate, Bella's strange behavior and cryptic remarks. She couldn't quite read Gregorio's intentions, his motivations. Was she overanalyzing everything, projecting her grief and longing onto a simple coincidence just because the horse looked so much like Willow? Or was there something deeper going on, something sinister and hidden that she hadn't yet uncovered? A dark secret lurking beneath the surface of Gregorio's polished life? "Welcome to Villa Duca," Gregorio announced proudly as the car turned onto a long, tree-lined driveway bordered by towering cypress trees, their tops reaching for the sky, a grand entrance befitting a man of his stature. Catherine gasped despite herself. Gregorio's estate was magnificent, a sprawling testament to wealth and history, a place of unimaginable luxury. A beautifully restored 16th-century villa perched on a hillside, it was surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens, fragrant with the scent of roses and lavender, ancient olive groves, their gnarled branches reaching for the sun, and what appeared to be world-class equestrian facilities, a complex of stables and arenas that rivaled anything she had ever seen, a testament to his passion, or perhaps his obsession, with horses. Servants appeared immediately as the car came to a stop, opening their doors with quiet efficiency, their movements silent and deferential. Catherine noticed that Bella barely acknowledged the staff as she headed straight for an outdoor seating area overlooking the horse paddocks, her movements quick and decisive, as if seeking refuge. Gregorio led Catherine to join his wife, where a server quickly appeared with a tray of wine and light refreshments, their movements silent and deferential, anticipating their every need. "The estate has been in my family for generations," Gregorio explained, gesturing toward the surrounding property with a sweeping hand, an expression of pride on his face, a man showcasing his legacy. "Though I've made significant improvements to the equestrian facilities in recent years, bringing them up to international standards." Catherine nodded politely, accepting a glass of chilled white wine, her mind still reeling from the grandeur of the place, the sheer scale of his wealth. "It's extraordinary. You must spend a lot of time here." "Not enough," Gregorio sighed, a practiced expression of regret, a man burdened by the demands of his global empire. "Business keeps me traveling, constantly moving from one place to the next, but I try to return at least once a month to reconnect with my roots." He glanced toward the drive, his attention seemingly divided, his gaze fixed on something in the distance, his anticipation evident. "Excuse me for a moment. I'm expecting an important delivery." As he walked away, his stride confident and unhurried, a man in control, Catherine noticed a van turning into the property, making its way up the long drive. Gregorio moved to intercept it before it reached the main house, his curiosity piqued. "Delivery," Bella scoffed, following Catherine's gaze, a cynical twist to her lips, a sound of disbelief. "I bet it's her. That Elysia girl. New handler for the stables." Her voice dripped with sarcasm, with a weary resignation, a knowledge of Gregorios' patterns. "He thinks I don't know, but there have been others before her, many others." Catherine studied the troubled woman beside her, her heart aching with a strange mix of sympathy and apprehension, a growing understanding of Bella's pain. "Bella, I don't mean to pry, but how do you tolerate it? His behavior, with you know what I mean?" Bella's laugh was hollow, a brittle sound that held no amusement, laced with bitterness. "You survive however you can. For me, it's this." She lifted her wine glass, the pale liquid swirling within, a temporary escape. "And these—" She patted her purse, where Catherine had seen her store her medication, her coping mechanisms. "You treat it like a job. Clock in, clock out, collect the benefits. It's a transaction, nothing more." The casual, almost detached way she described Gregorio's predatory behavior, the transactional nature of their marriage, chilled Catherine to the bone, a horrifying glimpse into a world of moral compromise. "Shouldn't someone report him?" Catherine asked, the words escaping before she could stop them, a sense of moral outrage rising within her. "Report him to whom?" Bella countered, her voice sharp, laced with a bitter cynicism, a deep-seated distrust. "The local police, who receive generous donations from the Duca Family Foundation each year. The politicians who attend his charity galas, who benefit from his influence. The journalists whose papers are kept afloat by his advertising, who dare not print anything negative." She set down her glass with surprising force, the sound echoing in the quiet gardens, a moment of pent-up frustration. "Enough of this depressing talk. Let me show you the property. It's actually quite beautiful when you ignore who owns it, when you can forget the man behind the curtain." They walked together through the manicured gardens, the air fragrant with the scent of blossoms, a temporary respite from the darkness, and toward the stables, wine glasses still in hand, a strange juxtaposition of beauty and disquiet. The equestrian facilities were indeed state-of-the-art, a testament to limitless wealth and a passion for horses, or perhaps a facade for something far darker. Spacious stalls with immaculate aisleways, gleaming brass fittings, and every amenity a horse could possibly need, a place designed for the comfort and care of these magnificent animals. As they passed one particular stable block, set slightly apart from the main complex, a place that felt somehow different, something else caught Catherine's eye, something that sent a jolt of recognition through her, a wave of disbelief so powerful it made her stumble. Hanging beside one of the stall doors, weathered and worn, was a dark brown leather saddle. Something about it, a subtle detail, the shape of the stirrup leather keeper, the curve of the seat, triggered a memory, a flash of recognition so powerful it made her gasp, a sound caught in her throat. She approached it, drawn by an irresistible force, a desperate hope overriding her caution. While Bella was momentarily distracted by something on her phone, her attention elsewhere, lost in her own world. Catherine lifted the saddle slightly, her hands trembling, examining it more closely, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. Her heart nearly stopped, a sickening lurch in her chest, when she saw the small, embossed lettering near the cantle, Willow. The saddle slipped from her fingers, landing with a heavy thud on the concrete aisle, the sound echoing in the quiet stable, a punctuation mark on her discovery. "I'm so sorry," she stammered as Bella looked up, her attention finally captured by the noise, her expression one of mild annoyance. "Don't worry about it," Bella said, eyeing the saddle with a detached disinterest, as if it were just another piece of equipment. That careless handler shouldn't have left equipment lying around anyway. It's a sign of sloppiness. She frowned, her gaze scanning the area. Wait here. I need to find that woman and remind her how things work here, the standards we maintain. As Bella walked away, her footsteps receding down the aisle, leaving Catherine alone with her earth-shattering discovery. Catherine's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She quickly snapped a photo of the saddle, the worn leather, the embossed name, a damning piece of evidence, undeniable proof. Then, without hesitation, she attached it along with the picture of Eternal Luce she had taken earlier during the competition. Without a second thought, driven by a desperate urgency, she sent both images to Detective Morris in Oregon, the lead investigator on Sophie's case, the one officer who had stayed in touch with her over the years, never giving up hope, a beacon of persistence in her long night of grief. She tried calling him immediately, her fingers fumbling with the keypad, her heart pounding with anticipation, but the call went to voicemail. A few moments later, a text message came through. Sorry, in a meeting. What's up? Catherine sent a voice message, her voice barely above a whisper, thick with emotion, with disbelief and a dawning horror. I'm in Italy, at an equestrian event. I found Willow's saddle at Gregorio Duca's estate. The horse I told you about, Eternal Luce. I'm certain the saddle belongs to her. It's Willow. Gregorio insists the horse belongs to someone else, but he wouldn't say who. I have a strong feeling Sophie might be here. Something about this place feels very wrong, very dark. The detective's response came quickly, a lifeline thrown across the vast distance, a confirmation that her message had been received and understood. If confirmed, this changes everything. We'll coordinate with FBI for international action. Be extremely careful. If Duca has connections to transport a horse internationally without raising flags, he likely has law enforcement connections. Don't trust local police. This will take time to arrange properly. Catherine's mind raced, a whirlwind of fear and dawning realization, a terrifying picture coming into focus. If Willow's saddle was here, and Eternal Luce was indeed Willow, what did that mean for Sophie? The presence of her daughter's horse and tack, here at Gregorio's secluded estate, a place of wealth and privilege, suggested a terrifying possibility, a horrifying truth that she had never dared to fully contemplate. That Gregorio might somehow be involved in Sophie's disappearance, in a way she had never imagined, in a way that went beyond simple coincidence. She couldn't wait for the FBI, for international action, for the slow wheels of justice to turn. She might never get this chance again. Catherine looked around, noting that Bella had disappeared from sight, her search for the careless handler taking her elsewhere, leaving Catherine alone with her discovery and her fear. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Catherine decided she had to investigate further on her own, compelled by a mother's instinct, a desperate need for answers. Moving with a deliberate casualness, as if she were simply exploring the extensive facilities, a curious visitor, Catherine walked deeper into the stable complex, past the main buildings, toward what appeared to be residential quarters, a cluster of smaller buildings set apart from the main villa. A modest farmhouse, separate from the grand villa, stood nestled amongst the trees, likely housing for stable staff and handlers, a place of simpler lives. She approached it cautiously, glancing over her shoulder to ensure she wasn't being observed, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum, a frantic rhythm. The door was unlocked, a common occurrence in such a remote, private property, where security relied on isolation and the assumption of trust, a false sense of security. Inside, she found a simple common area with a small kitchenette and several doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms, private spaces for the staff. One door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of light escaping from within, a silent invitation. Catherine hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the doorknob, her heart in her throat, then pushed it open further, peering inside, her breath held. The small room was sparsely furnished, a narrow bed, a simple dresser, a plain desk, the belongings of someone living a quiet, unassuming life. But what caught her attention, what made her knees nearly buckle and her breath catch in her throat, What sent a wave of shock and disbelief through her was a photograph on the nightstand. Her knees nearly buckled as she recognized the face smiling from the frame. Sophie. Her Sophie. The photo was recent, showing a young woman in her early 20s, her eyes bright, her smile radiant. Undeniably Sophie, but older, matured, a woman instead of the girl she remembered. Not the 14-year-old girl who had disappeared 8 years ago. A crash from somewhere nearby startled her, pulling her abruptly from the shock of recognition for the overwhelming surge of hope and fear. Catherine froze, listening intently, her senses heightened, straining to identify the source of the noise. Another crash followed, sharper this time, accompanied by a muffled voice coming from outside, from the direction of a small barn adjacent to the farmhouse, a place she hadn't noticed before. As she slipped out of the room, leaving the door as she had found it, trying to maintain the illusion of a casual visit, a young staff member appeared in the corridor, his eyes widening at the sight of her, surprise and apprehension on his face. "Sonora, you cannot be here," he said in heavily accented English, his voice urgent, filled with a sense of alarm. "Sonora Bella is looking for you. Please, I show you back to the villa." "I heard a noise," Catherine said, gesturing toward the barn, her voice trembling slightly, trying to keep her composure. "Someone might need help." "No, no," the young man insisted, reaching for her arm, his grip gentle but firm, attempting to guide her away. "Please, this area is private, for staff only. It is not for visitors." Catherine ignored him, propelled by an instinct stronger than caution, stronger than fear, a mother's desperate need to know. She pushed past him, her gaze fixed on the barn, and hurried toward it, her heart pounding, a sense of impending doom mixed with a flicker of desperate hope. The door wasn't locked. She pulled it open to find Gregorio pressing a dark-haired young woman against the wall, his body language undeniably aggressive, his face contorted with anger. Both turned at her entrance, startled by the interruption, their expressions a mixture of surprise and annoyance of being caught in the act. The young staff member arrived behind Catherine, breathless from trying to catch up, his face pale with fear, his eyes wide with alarm. "I'm sorry, Senor Duca," he stammered, his voice shaking, offering an apology for his failure to stop her. "I tried to—" "It's fine, Dalto," Gregorio interrupted, his voice eerily calm, the sudden shift in his demeanor more terrifying than anger, a chilling control. "She was meant to find us eventually. It was inevitable." He gestured dismissively. "Go back to the house. Tell Augusto to attend to Lady Bella. He'll understand what to do." The young man hesitated briefly, a flicker of fear and indecision in his eyes, then retreated, closing the door behind him, leaving Catherine alone with Gregorio and the young woman. Gregorio moved with surprising speed and strength for a man his age, his movements quick and decisive. Before Catherine could react, before she could even cry out, before she could process the scene before her, he struck her across the face with an open palm. The blow sent her stumbling backward, momentarily disoriented, a sharp pain blooming in her cheek, the taste of blood in her mouth. By the time she regained her balance, shaking her head to clear the sudden dizziness, he had seized a length of rope hanging from the wall and was advancing toward her, his eyes cold and hard, devoid of any warmth or recognition of their past friendship. "You always were too curious for your own good, Catherine," he said, his cultured voice now flat and chillingly devoid of warmth, a cruel edge to his tone. "Always asking questions, always looking for explanations." Richard understood discretion, the importance of keeping secrets. "You never did." Catherine backed away, her heart pounding, a primal fear gripping her, but found herself trapped against the barn wall, a dead end, nowhere left to run. "What have you done with my daughter?" she demanded, her voice raw with emotion, with fury and despair. Gregorio smiled, a cruel, humorless expression, a mask of triumph. "Done with her? I've given her opportunities she never would have had in your little farm in Oregon, in that provincial backwater." He grabbed her wrists, his grip strong, binding them together with practiced, efficient movements, rendering her helpless. a luxurious home, the horse she adored. I kept Willow for her, a constant companion. She's been homeschooled, exposed to culture, refinement. He secured the rope to a metal ring embedded in the wall, effectively immobilizing her, leaving her vulnerable. Look around you. He swept his arm around the lavish room, a display of his wealth and power, gesturing like a showman unveiling his masterpiece. Isn't this a far cry from that failing little farm you once called a future? She was a stable hand, nothing more. I offered to train her, to sponsor her, if she chose to stay with me after all. Bella's getting old and more useless by the day, a tiresome burden. You stole her life. Catherine spat, her voice trembling with fury, with a mother's rage. Her freedom, her childhood. I gave her a better life, Gregorio countered, his voice rising with a self-righteous indignation, a twisted justification for his actions. Ask her, Sophie, tell your mother how well you've been treated, how fortunate you are. Sophie's voice was barely audible, a fragile whisper, thick with emotion. I did what I had to do to survive, to keep Willow safe, to protect her. You see, Gregorio smiled, a triumphant glint in his eyes, a confirmation of his power. She adapted. They always do. How? Catherine demanded, her voice hoarse, a desperate need to understand the mechanics of his crime. How did you take her without anyone seeing, without a trace? Gregorio leaned against a workbench, seemingly pleased to explain his cleverness, to boast of his meticulous planning, of his flawless execution. It was remarkably simple. I've been planning it for months, ever since I first saw Sophie at that junior dressage competition when she was 12. Such extraordinary talent, such natural grace. His eyes took on a disturbing gleam as he continued, the recounting of his crime a source of perverse pleasure, a chilling detachment. That day, I followed her into the woods in my trailer, telling the stable hands I was visiting a breeder nearby. When she reached the most isolated section of the trail, I approached her as a friend, someone she trusted, someone who offered help. The sedative in the water I offered her worked quickly. She was asleep within minutes. Willow was more difficult, had to be tranquilized separately, a stronger dose. He described the meticulous details of his plan, the calculated steps he had taken to cover his tracks, to create false evidence of a potential accident, a carefully constructed deception, deliberately leaving torn pieces of tack near the trail, creating misleading hoof prints to suggest Willow had bolted in a panic. He transported Sophie and Willow to a private airfield where his connections ensured no questions were asked about the sedated girl or horse, where discretion was paramount. Falsified documents are simple when you have the right contacts, when you have enough money, he explained casually, as if discussing a business transaction. The cost of his crime, just another expense. Sophie became my niece, traumatized by a family tragedy, coming to Italy for specialized therapy. Willow was simply an expensive import with slightly irregular paperwork. Money smooths over so many complications, opens so many doors. Catherine fought against her restraints, the ropes biting into her wrists, sick with the horrifying realization that all those years ago, while she was frantically searching the woods with police and volunteers, while she was consumed by grief and fear, lost in a fog of despair, Gregorio had been beside her, pretending to help, pretending to care, while knowing exactly what had happened to Sophie, the architect of her pain. For 8 years, she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fury and disbelief, with the weight of years of suffering. You've kept my daughter prisoner, made me believe she was dead. How could you do that to someone you called a friend, to someone you claimed to care about? Friendship had nothing to do with it, Gregorio replied dismissively, his gaze fixed on Sophie, a possessive gleam in his eyes, devoid of any affection. I wanted Sophie from the moment I saw her ride. The rest was simply logistics, the practicalities of acquiring something I desired. And what about Bella? Catherine demanded, her gaze darting to Sophie, then back to Gregorio. Your wife knows, doesn't she? About the girls? About the girls? Gregorio shrugged, a casual, indifferent gesture, as if the lives of young women were of no consequence. Bella only understands the arrangement. She lives in luxury, travels as she pleases, and maintains her social position. In exchange, she looks the other way regarding my particular interests, my preferences. He turned to Sophie with a possessive smile, a chilling expression of ownership. Sophie has been quite cooperative over the years, haven't you, Kara? Especially once she realized resistance only made things worse for Willow, that her beloved horse's safety depended on her compliance. Sophie's eyes flashed with momentary defiance. A spark of the spirited girl Catherine remembered, a flicker of resistance in the face of years of subjugation. I only did what was necessary to survive and protect Willow. I gained your trust so I could find a way to get word out, to let my mother know I was alive. Today was my first chance, convincing you to bring Willow to the show where someone might recognize her, where the truth might be revealed. Gregorio laughed, a desperate, almost hysterical sound, devoid of genuine amusement. A desperate plan that nearly worked. I underestimated your mother's connection to that horse, her unwavering belief that Willow was still out there. He sighed theatrically, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair, a gesture of impatience. And now, unfortunately, adjustments must be made. Loose ends must be tied up. The barn door opened again, and Catherine was horrified to see young Elysia enter, her eyes wide with confusion and apprehension, a lamb walking into a wolf's den. Ah, perfect timing, Gregorio said, his voice regaining some of its earlier charm. A sickeningly smooth tone, a predator luring his prey. Come in, Elysia. Close the door. Catherine strained against her bonds, the rope biting into her skin, a desperate plea on her lips. She's just a child, Gregorio. How many girls have you taken? How many lives have you ruined? Taken. Gregorio appeared genuinely offended, as if the accusation were preposterous, an insult to his carefully constructed image. I offer opportunities. Employment, training with the finest horses in Europe. If additional arrangements develop, that's simply the nature of mutual benefit, a mutually agreeable arrangement. He motioned for Elysia to stand beside Sophie, her body language clearly indicating fear, her eyes wide with terror. Now, since you've gone and complicated things, Catherine, we'll have to move today's plans along a bit faster. We can't afford any more delays. Gregorio drew a gun from inside his jacket, a small, dark object that seemed incongruous in the setting, a symbol of violence in a place of beauty. But before he could raise it toward Catherine, before he could make good on his implied threat, before he could silence them forever, the barn door burst open again, a sudden, dramatic entrance. Bella stood in the entrance, her stance steady, a small pistol gripped firmly in her hand, her face pale but resolute. She raised the gun, her hand steady, and pulled the trigger. That's enough, Gregorio, she said, her voice remarkably calm, a chillingly detached tone. A woman pushed to her breaking point. Her gaze swept the scene, taking in Catherine tied to the wall, Sophie and Elysia standing together, their faces etched with fear, and her husband's surprised, bewildered expression, a look of disbelief. Bella, hurrah, Gregorio said soothingly, raising his hand slightly, a gesture of placation, attempting to regain control. You're not thinking clearly. You should find Augusto. He has your medication ready. You're not well. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, Bella replied, stepping into the barn and closing the door behind her, a final, decisive act, cutting them off from the outside world. She kept the gun aimed at Gregorio's chest, her hand steady, unwavering, a force to be reckoned with. I've suspected for years, the special trainees who came and went. The private quarters I wasn't allowed to visit. But I told myself it wasn't my business, that the lifestyle was worth the compromise, the comfort and security you provided. Her hand remained steady as she continued, her voice rising slightly, a tide of buried anger and resentment finally breaking free, a dam bursting. But seeing you today, with that girl at the show, watching you parade around with your charitable donations while destroying young lives, and now, hurting my friend. Don't be dramatic, Gregorio said, his tone hardening, the mask of charm slipping away to reveal the cruel reality beneath, his anger rising. Put the gun down before you do something you'll regret. The only thing I regret is not doing this years ago, Bella replied, her voice cold and resolute, her gaze fixed on Gregorio. The gunshot echoed through the barn, a deafening roar that startled everyone, the sound shattering the silence. Gregorio staggered backward, dropping his gun, clutching his chest where a dark stain was rapidly spreading across his expensive shirt. He looked down at the wound with an expression of genuine surprise, of disbelief, before collapsing to his knees, his body slumping to the ground, the life draining from his eyes. Bella immediately moved to untie Catherine, her hands trembling but determined, working quickly. "We need to get out of here. His security staff will have heard the shot." As soon as Catherine was free, her wrists raw and chafed, she rushed to Sophie, enveloping her daughter in a desperate embrace. 8 years of grief and longing pouring out in wrenching sobs as she clung to the child she had thought was lost forever. "Mom," Sophie whispered, her own tears flowing freely, hot against Catherine's neck, a shared release of emotion. "I never stopped hoping you'd find me." Their reunion, so long awaited, so desperately longed for, was cut short when Gregorio, still conscious despite his wound, reached for his gun, which lay on the floor near where he had fallen. Before anyone could react, before Catherine or Sophie or Elysia could move, he fired a single, wild shot. Bella collapsed, a bullet wound to her head, sending her crumpling to the floor in a terrible, final act that left no room for doubt, a life sacrificed. Gregorio turned the gun toward Catherine and Sophie, his eyes wild with fury, with a desperate, cornered rage, a man losing control. "Run!" Sophie cried, grabbing Catherine's arm, pulling her away from the horror, away from the dying man. They bolted out of the barn, their feet pounding against the earth, the sound of their desperate flight echoing in the sudden silence, a frantic escape. Behind them, Gregorio's enraged voice echoed through the air, a final, desperate roar. "If I can't have her, no one will." A gunshot rang out, but his strength faltered, his aim wild, the shot going wide. The bullet went wide, harmlessly embedding itself in the barn wall. The weapon slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor as he collapsed forward, his body slumping to the ground, blood spreading beneath him in a dark, widening pool. "We have to go," Catherine said urgently, pulling Sophie toward the door, her voice tight with fear and urgency. "Elysia, come with us. It's not safe here." The three of them fled the barn, emerging into the bright Tuscan sunshine that seemed obscenely beautiful, tragically indifferent against the horror they had just witnessed. They ran across the grounds toward the staff quarters, the modest farmhouse where they had encountered the young man earlier, their only hope of escape. "Dalto," Sophie called out as they approached, her voice a desperate plea, recognizing the kind face. "Dalto, please help us." The young staff member, Dalto, emerged from the building, his eyes widening at the sight of their distress, their tear-streaked faces, their trembling bodies, the blood on Catherine's cheek. "What has happened?" he asked, looking from Sophie to Catherine and the trembling Elysia, his voice filled with alarm. "Gregorio shot Bella," Catherine explained breathlessly, the words tumbling out, a torrent of fear and urgency. "He tried to shoot us too. We need to get away from here now, before his security finds us." Dalto's face paled, his eyes widening in understanding and fear, realizing the gravity of the situation. "The police, they're all in his pocket," Sophie interrupted, her voice urgent, a warning. "Please, Dalto, you know what kind of man he is. If you stay, you'll be implicated too. He will come after you." Indecision flickered across his features for a brief moment, a struggle between loyalty and self-preservation, before determination set in. "My car." "This way," he said, turning and running toward small, modest Fiat parked behind the staff building, a stark contrast to Gregorio's luxury vehicles, their only means of escape. They piled in, Catherine and Sophie in the back, Elysia in the front passenger seat, and Dalto accelerated down the service drive that circumvented the main entrance, leaving the grandeur and the horror of Villa Duca behind, the nightmare receding in the distance. As they sped away from the estate, the landscape blurring past in a green and gold rush, Catherine pulled out her phone and called Detective Morris again. This time, he answered immediately. "Catherine, are you all right?" His voice was sharp with concern, a welcome sound of familiarity and authority. "No," she replied, her voice shaking, the raw emotion evident. "I found Sophie. She's alive. She's with me. But there's been a shooting. Gregorio Duca shot his wife, and he's been shot too. We're fleeing the estate now." The detective's tone changed instantly, shifting from concern to one of urgent professionalism, his voice calm and authoritative, taking control of the situation. "Where are you heading?" "The police station in Siena, I think," Catherine said, looking to Dalto for confirmation. He nodded, his eyes fixed on the winding road, navigating the unfamiliar territory. "That's good," Morris replied. "I've already contacted our FBI attaché in Rome and the State Department. They're reaching out to the Italian authorities now. This is going to become an international incident. Catherine, I need you to go directly to the police. Don't stop anywhere else. I'll make sure they're expecting you." "What about Gregorio's influence with the local police?" Catherine asked, the fear still present in her voice, the knowledge of his power a heavy weight. "That's why we've involved federal authorities and the embassy," Morris explained. "This is too big for local cover-ups now. Stay on the line with me until you reach the station." As they rounded a curve in the road, they passed several police cars and an ambulance, their sirens wailing, speeding in the opposite direction toward the Duca estate. Catherine felt a surge of relief. At least emergency services had been called, which meant someone at the estate, perhaps Augusto or another staff member, had reported the shootings. The nightmare was coming to light. "Do you think Bella could survive?" she asked Sophie quietly, covering the phone's microphone with her hand, a hesitant question. Sophie shook her head, her eyes haunted, reflecting the terrible image she had witnessed, the finality of the scene. The shot was point blank to her head. And Gregorio? He was losing so much blood. "I don't think he made it." Catherine nodded grimly and returned to her conversation with Morris, updating him on what they'd just seen, the confirmation of the unfolding tragedy. "The embassy will send someone to meet you at the police station," he assured her. "Don't sign anything or make any formal statements until they arrive. Just explain that you're American citizens involved in a serious incident and waiting for consular assistance, that you need protection." The drive to Siena seemed both interminable and too brief, a surreal journey through a nightmare, time losing all meaning. Catherine kept her arm around Sophie, holding her close, unable to believe that after 8 years of grief and searching, her daughter was really here, beside her, tangible and alive, a miracle. "I never gave up," Catherine whispered, the words a vow, a confession, a statement of unwavering faith. "Not really. Even when everyone told me to accept that you were gone, to move on, I couldn't." Sophie leaned against her mother's shoulder, her body finally relaxing into the familiar comfort of her mother's embrace, a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. "I knew if anyone could find me, it would be you. That's why I begged Gregorio to bring Willow to the show. I thought maybe somehow—" "Willow." Catherine remembered suddenly, the other piece of the puzzle, the catalyst for this terrifying reunion. "She's safe," Sophie assured her, her voice a soft murmur. "Bella really did give her to you. Once we sort this out with the authorities, you'll be able to claim her officially. She will be ours again." Catherine marveled at the strange, improbable twist of fate that had reunited her not only with her daughter, but with Sophie's beloved horse as well, a symbol of their lost connection. They arrived at the Siena police station, a modern building that stood in stark contrast to the medieval architecture surrounding it, a juxtaposition of old and new. Dalto parked the car and turned to them with serious, resolute eyes. "I will come with you," he said, his voice firm, his decision made. "To tell what I know about Senor Duca. It is time someone speaks the truth, time for him to be held accountable." Together, the four of them, a bruised and weary group, entered the station. The desk sergeant looked up, his expression changing from routine indifference to one of surprise and then concern as Catherine, her voice trembling but clear, asked for someone who spoke English and mentioned that they were expected, that they were under the protection of the American embassy. Within minutes, they were separated and led to different interview rooms, the bureaucratic wheels of justice beginning to turn, the process of bringing Gregorio to justice starting. Before being parted from Sophie, Catherine embraced her tightly, fiercely, a silent promise passing between them, a vow of protection. "I won't let them separate us again," she promised, her voice a fierce whisper. "Not ever." The fluorescent lights of the interview room cast harsh, unforgiving shadows as Catherine recounted everything to the Italian detective assigned to her case. Inspector Rossi, a man with tired eyes and a patient demeanor, listened intently, taking meticulous notes, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts as she described Gregorio's confession, the horrifying details of Sophie's abduction, and the subsequent shootings, the violence that had erupted in the peaceful Tuscan countryside. "Signora Duca shot her husband, and then he shot her," he clarified, his voice low and steady, seeking confirmation. "Yes," Catherine confirmed, the memories vivid and painful, etched into her mind. She was trying to help us escape. She'd realized what kind of man she was married to, the depths of his depravity. Inspector Rossi nodded, a grim expression on his face. "We have received updates from the hospital. Senor Duca is in critical condition. He has lost much blood. The doctors are not optimistic." "And Bella?" Catherine asked, though she already knew the answer from Sophie's description of the wound, a sense of sadness for the troubled woman. "Signora Duca did not survive," the inspector confirmed solemnly. "The gunshot was fatal." Catherine closed her eyes briefly, a complicated mixture of grief and gratitude washing over her. Bella, a deeply troubled woman trapped in her own kind of gilded cage, a prisoner of circumstance and a man's cruelty, had given her life to save them, a final act of redemption. "What happens now?" Catherine asked, opening her eyes, facing the daunting reality of the aftermath, the long road ahead. "That depends partly on whether Senor Duca survives," Inspector Rossi explained, his voice matter-of-fact, outlining the legal complexities. "But regardless, there will be a thorough investigation. Your daughter's testimony about her abduction, the false documentation, the years of captivity, these are extremely serious crimes, crimes that will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." A knock at the door interrupted them. Another officer entered and spoke quietly to Inspector Rossi in Italian before departing. "A representative from your embassy has arrived," the inspector informed her, his tone indicating the significance of the development, the international attention the case was attracting. "And the FBI has contacted us directly about your case. This has become quite significant, Sonora Hayes." "I just want to take my daughter home," Catherine said simply, the only thing that mattered, the only thing she desired. "That may take some time," Inspector Rossi cautioned, his expression sympathetic but firm, explaining the necessary procedures. "There are statements to complete, evidence to process, and if Senor Duca survives, there will likely be a trial, though perhaps not for many months. The wheels of justice can turn slowly." "Will we have to stay in Italy all that time?" Catherine asked, the prospect daunting, a further delay to their return to normalcy. "No, I don't believe so," he replied, offering a glimmer of hope. "With international cooperation, arrangements can be made for testimony via video link if necessary, to minimize your time away from home. But for now, you will need to remain available for at least several days while the initial investigation proceeds, while we gather the necessary information." Another officer appeared with coffee and water, which Catherine accepted gratefully, her throat dry, her body weary, the exhaustion of the day weighing heavily upon her. Her phone buzzed with messages from her team at the Equestrian Center, concerned about her whereabouts. She quickly texted them back that she was safe and would explain everything later, offering a brief reassurance. A new message, with an attached photo, caught her attention. A beautiful image of Willow, or Eternal Luce as she had been called, standing contentedly in a temporary stall at the competition venue, being tended to by Catherine's grooms, their faces etched with relief and wonder. The sight of the horse, Sophie's horse, who had been taken alongside her all those years ago, a tangible piece of their lost life, brought fresh tears to Catherine's eyes. Against all odds, her family was being reunited piece by piece. Hours later, after extensive statements, documentation, and coordination with the American embassy, after countless questions and explanations, Catherine was finally allowed to reunite with Sophie in a small waiting area. They fell into each other's arms, holding tight as if afraid they might be separated again, the years of forced separation melting away in the warmth of their embrace, a bond unbroken by time and distance. The embassy representative says we can stay at a hotel they recommend, Catherine explained, her voice muffled against Sophie's hair, outlining their immediate future. We'll be under protection there until everything is sorted out, until we can safely return home. Sophie nodded against her mother's shoulder, her body trembling slightly. What about Elysia and the others at the estate? The police are interviewing everyone, Catherine assured her, stroking her daughter's hair, offering comfort and reassurance. Inspector Rossi said they're bringing in special investigators who handle trafficking and exploitation cases. Elysia will be taken care of. I promise she will be safe. They sat together on a hard bench, hands clasped, embassy officials completing paperwork for their temporary accommodation, the administrative details of their ordeal. Sophie looked exhausted, the years of captivity evident in the shadows beneath her eyes and the weariness with which she observed everyone around them, a quiet vigilance. Do you think he'll die? Sophie asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper, a complex question. Catherine considered her answer carefully. The inspector said it doesn't look good. But regardless of whether he survives, he'll never hurt you or anyone else again. There's too much evidence now, too many witnesses, too many people who know the truth. Sophie nodded slowly, her gaze distant, processing the weight of her experience. I should feel relieved, I know, but mostly I just feel empty, like I've been holding my breath for 8 years, and I don't remember how to breathe normally. It will take time, Catherine said, squeezing her daughter's hand, offering comfort and reassurance. We'll find help. Therapists who specialize in trauma recovery. People who can help you heal. There's no rush, no timetable for healing. We will take it one day at a time. What about the farm? Sophie asked, a flicker of concern in her eyes, a connection to their past life. Is it still? It's struggling, Catherine admitted, but it's still ours. And now that you're coming home, now that we'll have Willow back. She smiled despite her exhaustion, a genuine, hopeful smile, a glimpse of a brighter future. We'll rebuild together. Sophie rested her head on her mother's shoulder, a gesture so familiar, so deeply ingrained in their shared history, yet so long absent that it made Catherine's heart ache with a bittersweet tenderness. I never stopped looking for you, Catherine whispered, the words a continuation of her earlier vow, a statement of unwavering love. Not really. Even when everyone told me to accept that you were gone, to give up hope, I couldn't. I never stopped hoping you would find me, Sophie replied, her voice soft, filled with a quiet certainty, a shared faith. Even in the darkest moments, I held on to that. As they sat together in that sterile police station waiting room, surrounded by the controlled chaos of an international investigation, Catherine felt a sense of peace settle over her for the first time in 8 years. The road ahead would be difficult, she knew. Recovery from trauma, legal proceedings, rebuilding their lives from the ground up. But they would face it together, mother and daughter, their bond strengthened by their ordeal. Detective Morris called again to check on them, promising continued support from the American authorities and expressing his profound relief that Sophie had been found alive, his voice filled with genuine emotion. Catherine updated him briefly, her voice calmer now, then returned her attention to her daughter. The event organizers are arranging transport for Willow back to Oregon, Catherine told Sophie, showing her the photo on her phone, a visual confirmation that their beloved horse was safe. She'll be waiting for us when we get home. Sophie touched the screen gently, tears filling her eyes at the sight of her beloved horse, a tangible link to her stolen past, a symbol of hope. She recognized you at the show, didn't she? Catherine nodded, a shared understanding passing between them, a recognition of the deep bond between Sophie and Willow. Some connections can't be broken, no matter how much time passes, no matter how far apart you are. As embassy officials approached to escort them to their hotel, a temporary sanctuary, a place of safety and respite, Catherine and Sophie stood together, arms around each other, a silent testament to their resilience, their unbreakable bond. They had survived the unimaginable, separation, captivity, violence, and emerged on the other side, changed, marked by their experiences, but unbroken, their spirits intact. Outside the police station, the ancient city of Siena continued its timeless rhythms. Church bells marked the passing hours, their resonant chimes echoing through the narrow streets. Tourists strolled through picturesque piazzas, their laughter and conversation a cheerful murmur, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded nearby. Locals went about their daily business, seemingly untouched by the events of the day. The contrast between the medieval beauty surrounding them and a modern horror they had endured was stark, almost jarring, a reminder of the duality of life. Yet, as they stepped into the waiting embassy car, a symbol of safety and support, Catherine felt hope rising within her, a fragile but persistent flame, a flicker of light in the darkness. Hope for healing, for justice, for the future that had been stolen and was now, against all odds, returned to them. The nightmare that had begun 8 years ago in the Oregon woods was finally ending here, in the rolling hills of Tuscany, under the watchful eyes of those who would protect them. The path forward would not be easy. There would be challenges and obstacles, but they would walk it together, mother, daughter, and a horse that had somehow miraculously helped bring them back to each other, a silent partner in their rescue. In the midst of tragedy and evil, they had found their way back to one another, and that, Catherine knew, with a profound certainty, was nothing short of a miracle. Thank you for joining us for this incredible story of a mother's enduring love and a daughter's fight for survival. If this tale moved you and you want to hear more stories that inspire and captivate, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next upload. Share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that hope can endure even the darkest of times.